Oh man, definitely we have to get into this.
Yeah, let's talk
we
about
have to talk
Chris.
about the Christopher Bynum case, folks. This is a case that's really heated up this week because a judge denied a petition for post-conviction relief Monday.
Oh.
Yeah, for Chris Bynum, who's serving a 300-year prison sentence for the murders of 5 people here in Gary in 2000 that he says and his supporters say he didn't commit. Now, new evidence was introduced during several hearings for him last year. It was deemed not credible and could not be reproduced if a new trial was granted. Lake County criminal judge Natalie Bakota wrote, he actually confessed in 2000 to 3 of the 5 homicides and gave a conflicting statement about the remaining 2 homicides. He was convicted by a jury in 2001 of all 5 murders and sentenced to 5 consecutive 60-year sentences. Now, during a series of hearings from February the 2nd to the 4th last year, he testified that Gary police refused to allow him to make a phone call or contact an attorney during his interrogation and said that his statements about the homicides were coerced. According to him, he was forced to sign a confession after the police threatened to harm his family. Now listen to this. Around the time of his arrest, the police arrested his girlfriend, but they later released him. He said the police coaxed and coerced confessions and repeatedly denied his request for an attorney and to make a phone call. This case has marked the 3rd time that Bynum has unsuccessfully fought post-conviction relief. And just looking at the statements of this case, some of the other people have confessed to the crime.
Oh.
You know, and even witnesses have had some, discrepancies in their statement. One of the witnesses introduced in 2011 said that he heard gunshots and saw one of the other men who is accused of this crime, and they actually saw that man and Robert Carr in the area where the bodies had just been killed, I guess. A second witness said they only saw one person, and that man is currently in prison in Minnesota. A third witness claimed that 2 of the possible suspects arrived at her home wearing bloody clothing, and one of them told her that the other had shot 5 people. A 4th witness says she served as a getaway driver for 2 of the other possible suspects during the homicide at the house. And so we've seen like all this go on, and Bynum's attorney Francis Watkins actually won permission from the Indiana Court of Appeals to file a successive petition based on the confession and video statement by a man named Gerald Matthews, aka Christopher Stokes, after he was shot to death. Mr. Matthews has been shot to death here in Gary in 2014. He was not among the 2 men accused in Bynum's other post-conviction relief filings, but Matthews actually confessed and named one of the men as the only other person directly involved in the killings. An acquaintance of Matthews sent the alleged confession to Watson of the Indiana University McKinney School of Law Wrongful Conviction Clinic. Matthews actually killed less than 2 weeks after giving this acquaintance the envelope with the confession. And so there's no DNA to support any of this, any of the conviction against Mr. Bynum. And so a lot of people here, including Reagan Hatcher and Robert Buggs, who's the chair of the Gary NAACP,
right.
These people have all been involved trying to get this young man out of jail. The way this case is looking, just from the evidence, it looks like he may have been wrongfully convicted indeed.
Now, I did hear Reagan Hatcher's interview. I have not heard Mr. Buggs speak on it. And then I heard Attorney Darnell Lyle talk about it on his show this week as well. Um, it does seem like it is more difficult to get a decision reversed post conviction than it is to fight a conviction in the first place. At the same time, when you don't have money, the legal system may be blind, but the scales can be affected by money. Maybe because justice is blind, justice doesn't see when someone puts more money on one side of the scale.
Right.
But that has always been a problem, and it always will be a problem, simply because, if you've got enough money, you can hire better attorneys.
Right.
If you've got enough money, you can spend the money that it takes to do the investigation, and of course, the state has sort of an advantage because it can spend as much money as it wants to. So if they want to get you, they can spend the money to get you. They can dig and dig and dig until they find something on you. And if you're, and as a defendant, the only advantage you have is that our Constitution says you are to be treated as innocent. But, again, you come into trial, you come into the courtroom, you're wearing your coveralls, or you don't come into the courtroom looking like a person who comes from a better background, a better past, a better lineage, and there you are, possibly even looking in the eyes of some of the jurors like what they would think a person who would do this thing would look like. For whatever reason, they think that. But you look like that, there's no way to make justice truly impartial when it's a human situation. The only thing we could, and I don't think anybody would agree to this, would be to say, okay, unless you can prove beyond, not just beyond a reasonable doubt, but beyond any doubt whatsoever, you have to let the person go, because most people want to feel safe in their home. That's the thing.
I absolutely agree with that. And really, this is one of the reasons why I'm not a supporter of the death penalty. I think this country is incapable of getting it and kind of doling it out correctly because we have situations like this. This is what we were talking about earlier about white supremacy, the prison industrial complex, the two-tiered legal system.
Yeah.
Brothers like Chris Bynum are maybe victims of the prison industrial complex. I'm saying that because he has been convicted, but from what I'm looking at this evidence, it doesn't seem like he was the man who did this. And we have countless amounts of young black men who are sitting in prison. Look, there's men of all races who are in prison wrongfully. We see people, even white men, get out of jail after 20, 30 years for crimes. Like wrongful conviction isn't even just limited to us, but we know that in our case, that this legal system has never meted out justice fairly for us. We know this.
And then again, in the sense of justice as being you get what you deserve,
right.
It's impossible on the human level to do that for every person. It's impossible. Simply because you would have to know for certainty that the person before you either did it or know for certainty that they didn't. And since most of the time you can't get to that level of certainty, what should you do? Should you let a potentially guilty person go free? Or should you say, well, he may be innocent, but at least we know we got somebody. But see, even with those things, there's problems there because you got the wrong guy in prison, and now you're not looking. Well, what happens the next time somebody else gets killed? And you thought that you had the right guy. See, this isn't just a race problem. But because of racism, it's a problem that affects race.
Right.
But it's ultimately a problem of how do you create a system so that when we arrest somebody and when we have a trial, we actually have overturned every rock. We have the evidence to be able to say, this was the person. And that's why we're bringing them to trial. Because the evidence points to this person, conclusively points to this person. And if not, we let them go. You know, I would, to me, I'll say, you'd almost have to have it, unless you've got solid evidence, you shouldn't arrest them. But I know somebody's going to disagree with that.
Right.
Because if somebody's terrorizing your neighborhood, you want somebody in jail.
You do?
You want, if somebody's not in jail very quickly, the police chief is going to hear a bunch of noise. The mayor is going to hear a bunch of noise. And sometimes I suspect, even in a town like Gary, that's, 85, 90% black, there's just as much pressure on a police department filled with black police officers to arrest somebody that's terrorizing the neighborhood as it would be if it were a bunch of white police officers. No difference there. We want the bad people arrested. So if the measure of their job is somebody gets arrested, somebody's going to get arrested.
Yeah.
We're not going to be happy with a system that says, well, we may not have arrested anybody or not very many people, but everybody we arrested, you can bet we had solid evidence.
All right, bro, you have to get the last word on this particular topic because we have to go to a break.
Yeah.
We are out of time right now for this segment. We'll be right back. We got to talk about UBI. Hopefully next week we get to talk about the PRO Act. We can get into the PRO Act, which I believe is one of the most important legislations passed by the House in many years. But please, don't hesitate to call in. That number is 219-885-1371. That number again, 219-885-1371. We'll be right back right after this.